Good afternoon, friends, and thank you very much for being here this afternoon for our regular interaction. Before I begin, let me introduce some of my colleagues who will join today. And on my right is Mr. Navtej Sarna, who is Additional Secretary, International Organizations. Further on his right is Mr. T.S. Tirumurthy, who is Joint Secretary, United Nations, dealing with economic and social issues. And on my left is Mr. Pawan Kapoor, who is Joint Secretary, United Nations, dealing with political issues. The idea is that they will give you a sort of a understanding of what the 68th session of the UN General Assembly will be. But before I ask them, I have a few announcements to make. I will take questions only on those announcements in the beginning. Subsequent to that, there will be this briefing related to the United Nations General Assembly session. And after that, if any of you have questions, you're welcome to ask me on issues which are not covered either in my announcements or in their responses. One final thing is that we will have a separate briefing on the Prime Minister's visit to the United States and his activities in the US as well as the UNGA, and that will be on the 20th by the Foreign Secretary. So what I would suggest is that please keep your questions on those aspects for a later date, whereas you can now focus on the issues that we are now touching. Also, as all of you know, each one gets one chance. So choose your questions carefully. There will not be a second round of questions because the number of people who are here, we won't be able to accommodate anybody more than once. With those preliminary introductory remarks, let me make the announcements that I have. The first announcement is, as those of you who perhaps are aware and are following our advisories, the Foreign Minister of Latvia, Mr. Edgar Rinkevich, is in New Delhi. Actually, this morning he signed a double taxation avoidance agreement with India. The Indian signatory was the External Affairs Minister, Shri Salman Khurshid. With the signing of the double taxation avoidance agreement, India and Latvia now have the economic architecture in place for deepening and expanding their bilateral relations. We had previously signed a bilateral investment promotion and protection agreement in 2011, and this fits in with that, and we hope that the present bilateral trade, which is approximately 177 million, will increase following this agreement. My next announcement relates to the visit of the External Affairs Minister, Shri Salman Khurshid, to Canada. The External Affairs Minister will be traveling to Canada from the 21st to the 23rd of this month. The visit is primarily for the first round of the strategic dialogue between India and Canada. If you could recollect, when Prime Minister Harper visited India last year in perhaps November, there was an agreement that the External Affairs Ministers will meet annually for a strategic dialogue, and this is the first round of that strategic dialogue. This will be held between the two foreign ministers, that is External Affairs Minister Shri Salman Khurshid and his Canadian counterpart Mr. John Baird in Toronto on the 22nd. Subsequently, External Affairs Minister will also travel to Ottawa, where he will meet other senior ministers, including the Minister for Economy, the Minister for Trade, Immigration, and Natural Resources. From there, the External Affairs Minister is scheduled to travel to the United Nations headquarters to join in during the United Nations General Assembly. The last announcement that I have to make is that Dr. Ashwini Kumar, who is the Special Envoy of the Prime Minister to Japan, today earlier met the Japanese Prime Minister, Mr. Shinzo Abe, in Tokyo. The Special Envoy is on a 3-day visit to Tokyo as part of preparations for the visit of their Majesties later this year to India. As you are aware, the Emperor and Empress of Japan are to visit India from the end of November and the appointment of Mr. Kumar was to ensure that their visit is given adequate importance and focus, and he is working towards that end. He also used the opportunity of his meeting with the Prime Minister to reiterate Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's invitation to Prime Minister Abe for the annual summit which is to be held in New Delhi. During the next 2 days, the special envoy of the Prime Minister will also meet the Foreign Minister and the Minister for Economy and Trade, who was recently in India, as you are aware. He is separately also interacting with captains of industry to promote greater economic engagement between India and Japan. That brings me to the conclusion of my 3 announcements. If any of you have questions on these 3, I'll take them now. Otherwise, I will request, otherwise I will then request we move to the next element, but I see that you have a question on one of these 3. Yes, please. Yes, please speak into the mic, otherwise we won't be able to record.
Fair enough. So just with regard to Their Majesties of Japan visit, has the itinerary been finalized yet? Because I see that we have Delhi and Chennai on the agenda so far, and I just wondered if there's a visit being considered to Imphal, perhaps, with the relevance of the 70th anniversary of the Battle of Imphal falling next year, and the great significance to the people of Japan of however many, maybe up to 50,000 soldiers falling there. I just wonder whether Mr. Kumar had been speaking to his counterparts about that.
I don't have a readout of what exactly he spoke, right, because the meeting was about an hour ago, and so I don't have a readout of that. But that said, many of your colleagues here are aware of the time that we take to announce the itinerary. And I think they are all very comfortable that we announce these specific schedules perhaps less than a week before the visit. So we are quite some time ahead in those terms. Once we finalize those, we will certainly make it public.
But would you anticipate that it had actually been considered, given the gravity of the anniversary, perhaps, to both countries, and the fact of different participations in the war? It would be a significant milestone for Their Majesties to visit, surely.
I'm certain the Japanese side will take into account what you said, and we too will take that into account. But my point is that at this stage, this was the first meeting of the special envoy who's on a 3-day visit. I do not have a readout of what exactly was covered. Should we have that, we will certainly share with all of you. Yes, sir. Just a minute. He'll bring the mic.
When is Mr. Shinzo Abe coming to India?
I just mentioned that we have reiterated that invitation for an annual summit. I did not indicate that he is accepted and the dates have to be finalized. Once that is done, we will let you know. But right now, the principal focus and the primary visit that we are focusing on is the first ever visit of the Emperor and Empress of Japan to India. And any visit from Japan at a senior level will only be after that. So our primary focus is end November, early December for the visit of the Emperor and Empress of Japan, which we are looking forward to. Fine. If there are none, what I'll do is I'll request my colleague, Mr. Navtej Sarna, to give you, to speak to you for a short while about the issues related to the United Nations General Assembly, and then the floor is open for questions on that. Navtej.
Thanks, Akbar. And good afternoon, friends. Good to be here with all of you. Let me start by giving you the basic structure of the forthcoming 68th General Assembly session. The high-level segment is essentially what we're going to focus on, because I think that is of primary news interest, and also involves the involvement of heads of government, heads of state, foreign ministers. The high-level segment of this year's session is going to be from the 24th of September to the 1st of October. The general debate, which carries on another 3 days, to be exact, from the 23rd to the 4th of October. During this year's summit session is going to be presided over, that is, the President of the General Assembly for the next one UN year, so to speak, is going to be John Ash, who is the former permanent representative of Antigua and Barbuda. So he will be presiding over the entire session. And those of you who've been to these sessions and covered earlier sessions would know that the heads of state, heads of government speak, followed by foreign ministers. And you already know that, while I'll leave the details of PM's visit for Foreign Secretary's briefing, he is going to be speaking on the 28th. The External Affairs Minister is going to be in New York for the high-level segment. He's expected to reach there late on the 23rd evening and will take part in the high-level meetings which are there going to be held as part of the UN session, as well as several high-level meetings which various groupings and countries organize, utilizing the presence of the dignitaries from different countries in one place in New York. Just to give you an idea of these high-level meetings, both within the UN and without the UN system, but which will take place in that 1 week, and which we hope to attend at different levels. Those which we can at the level of External Affairs Minister, certainly so, others at the level of Foreign Secretary, and yet others at the level of various other ministers or delegates who would be traveling there. And these are all, I think it's important to underline that this year the high-level meetings also have a kind of connection between them, which comes out of the theme of this General Assembly session. And the theme is going to be Post-2015 Development Agenda - Setting the Stage. So these high-level meetings are really going to be the first time, in a way, that the entire international community is going to be focusing on the development agenda post-2015 in a concentrated, cross-cutting way. Not to say that we haven't been talking about this for the last couple of years in different places, but here it'll all sort of come to a head, and hopefully a path forward will be charted. So the high-level meetings begin on 23rd September. The first one is a high-level meeting on disability and development. It's going to be followed the next day, that is on the 24th of September, by the inaugural meeting of the high-level political forum on sustainable development. Now this forum is the result of a direct decision taken in the Rio+20 conference last year. And this is the first time that this forum is going to be meeting to see how to take the sustainable development agenda forward in keeping with the decisions that were taken at Rio+20, and thereby also implying that in keeping with the principles which are enshrined in Rio+20. This is a very, very important aspect, particularly from the point of developing countries, from the point of India, that in the development process, we stick to the Rio+20 political consensus and not try to chip away at it, and not try to create new consensus and change the goalposts as we go along. The third high-level meeting is going to be the special event on Millennium Development Goals. This takes place on the 25th of September. As you know, the Millennium Development Goals are supposed to come to an end 2015. Clearly, much remains to be done on the MDGs. In some we have moved, not only as a country, but as the world. As many others, we have not moved as fast as we wanted to. These are of critical importance to us, critical importance to developing countries, and we need to understand what is going to happen to them in 2015. Do we just drop them and move on? Or do we find a mechanism in which they are absorbed into the agenda that is worked out later? There's going to be a high-level dialogue on migration and development. Migration is another very important issue, and this is going to take place on the 3rd and 4th of October. Besides that, there's going to be a high-level meeting on nuclear disarmament. It's not development-related, but it's a very important issue, again, a very important issue for India. And this will take place on the 26th of September. There are other grouping meetings which are important. There's going to be a G77 ministerial meeting, group of developing countries. There's going to be a NAM ministerial meeting, which again is traditionally extremely important for us. And there are going to be other smaller group meetings. There's a meeting of the BRICS foreign ministers. There's a meeting of the IBSA foreign ministers. And there's a meeting of the G4 foreign ministers. G4, as you know, is the group consisting of India, Japan, Germany, and Brazil, which formed for the purpose of UN Security Council reforms. So these will take place all in a concentrated space of 3 or 4 days, and we will try to present India's positions at each of these meetings at the highest level possible. The External Affairs Minister would also be having a series of bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the UNGA. This is always a very, very difficult process of scheduling, because we have to match schedules of various foreign ministers coming in and out of New York, and there are other commitments. But I think we are fairly confident that he would be having a series of very substantive meetings with foreign ministers. Some of those I have on my list: the Foreign Minister of China, the Foreign Minister of Egypt, Foreign Minister of Libya, and the Foreign Minister of Palestine, and also the meeting with the German Foreign Minister, and possibly also with the Foreign Minister of the UAE. As I said, these are always subject to last-minute scheduling problems. More may happen. So we are tying these up, but I thought I should give you a heads up that these are in a fairly advanced stage of planning, so that you know what we are looking forward to. Besides that, of course, the External Affairs would be having other bilateral events in terms of bilateral US events, which we can talk about maybe later when you have the other bilateral briefing. In any case, the 68th General Assembly session is going to broadly follow up a number of important issues which were touched upon or we have been working upon in the previous one. Briefly to recap, the 67th, I mean, it was a very important year for us, very important General Assembly session for us, not only because of the General Assembly, but because at least for part of the year we were still on the UN Security Council. And during our last few months, which fall into the 67th GA calendar, we did take up some very important issues which would be good to keep in mind. We took up, for instance, during our presidency in November 2012, the whole issue of piracy, which has been a very big issue for India and several other countries, and we brought it to the fore, and not something which just happens off the coast of Somalia, but we show that it has a number of related issues, humanitarian aspects, political aspects, and this became the theme of our debate during our UN Security Council presidency, and we even managed to get a presidential statement out which set into focus several important concepts which deal with this modern day challenge. We also, as chairman of the Counter-Terrorism Committee, we brought focus on another aspect which is crucial for India's security, and that is the financing, the global financing of terrorism. And we did it by holding an unprecedented number of meetings of the committees which deal with the financing aspects to bring greater and greater focus on these issues, because as you know, one of the most important things in counter-terrorism is cooperation at a global scale, information sharing, and cooperation in the law enforcement and other agencies. We also focused on UN Security Council reforms in a big way. We managed to ginger up the process, so to speak, by working with the L69, which is a group of developing countries interested in Security Council reforms, and coming up with a common text between the L69 and the C10, which is the negotiating group for the African group. And this common text showed that there was possibility of coming together of two groups which people thought, you know, you're locked into different positions. But and India played a critical role in that. We kept up the G4 process. There was a G4 meeting last year at the ministerial level, and then there was a G4 follow-up at the Director General's level in Brazil in April this year, which I attended, and which gave a greater impetus to what the G4 could be looking forward to do, and we hope to do that in this ministerial meeting again. We kept on pushing the chairman of the negotiating group, Ambassador Tannen of Afghanistan, to move towards a negotiating text with limited success, not because of his own desire not to do so, but we were faced with a set of circumstances and political realities emanating in the previous presidency, which made it a bit difficult for him to move. But we are satisfied reasonably with the fact that the reform process we kept on the front burner, and we would continue to do so in the session to come. We also focused on our development priorities in helping set up the Open Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, Rio +20 also mandated the international community to produce a set of sustainable development goals. Now, what these goals are going to be, how are they going to be negotiated, how are they going to be implemented, is all still an open question. But where it is being done is an open working group. So we pushed proactively with a set of developing countries to have this group set up, and most importantly, to make sure that this group takes decisions only by consensus. And 4 meetings of this group have now been held, and we have another 4 meetings coming up and another 5, I think, in the next year, which will be working on these goals. This is just by way of a report card on some of the important issues that we were now been finishing with this session. The coming session, because of the high-level impetus given to development, I think is going to be very importantly focused on this 2015 development agenda. I've seen some material appear in the Indian press on this, and I think it's something which is going to define our development paradigm in a globalized world. You know, we can't be following different paradigms from the rest of the world. We do get impacted. I think it's very important to focus on this and try to understand what is happening on this. let me very briefly tell you the process that's happened so far on this. One, I've already mentioned there is this Rio +20 process, which said make sustainable development goals, have a high-level political forum. That's one aspect. The second aspect is actually the high-level panel which was set up by the UN Secretary General, which consisted of the President of Indonesia, the Prime Minister of UK, and I think the President of Liberia. And a high-level panel report was produced. Now, frankly speaking, we were a bit concerned that this high-level panel report should not miss out concerns of developing countries and should not miss out on our concerns. So we very actively engaged through the year with our interlocutors on these issues and kept underlining our concerns. To a large extent, I would say these concerns were met, not in whole, certainly. But we see openings there in that report in which we can now push our agenda. And this is only because of a very constant, very persistent engagement that we kept up with our interlocutors on this. And the third activity that has been happening on this is a UNDP-sponsored process in which they have undertaken consultations, I think, in about 50 countries with different groups, students, labor unions, the industrial lobbies, to see what is important for that country, and that is feeding into the Secretary Generals. Now, all these three rivers, so to speak, have to come together somewhere. And where do they come together? What India wants is we want that they should come together in an intergovernmental negotiating process in which there is a level playing ground, in which developing and developed countries can sit down together and have a genuine negotiation. You see, it has to be different from the MDGs. The MDGs sort of came from the sky. There's a modern day 10 commandments. You will do this, you will do this, you will do this, you will do this. Now that's fine, because most of the MDGs were good. I mean, the one that was really good was that the developing countries would help finance these things, and that's the one that's not been met. Or the developed countries would. But this time we want that everything that we agree to is actually negotiated. So we are hoping that with these high-level summits, these high-level events, these various streams will come together, an intergovernmental process will be announced and will be actually set up, start work next year, by which time we would have done some amount of preparatory work on the Sustainable Development Goals. We'd have some idea of what to do with the remaining aspects of the MDGs, and then we would take it forward. Which direction do we want to take it forward? We want to keep the focus on poverty eradication. Poverty eradication without qualifications. We hear things of, okay, we'll eradicate extreme poverty, or we'll eradicate poverty as long as it doesn't impact on environment, or we'll eradicate poverty in a sustainable fashion. Now, these are all very loaded terms. In a country like India and several other countries where poverty is an everyday reality, you want poverty eradication, period. You don't want it with qualifiers. And we want it we know it can be done with economic growth. So poverty eradication and economic growth. These are the crucial things and means of implementation. And it's very important that your development agenda is not only for developing countries. Your development agenda should cover all countries. Your development agenda, for instance, should cover consumption patterns in developed countries. Consumption patterns in developed countries impact upon an environment, impact upon various other things. Your development agenda should also cover reform of the world's governing institutions, financial and political as far as we are concerned. So there are a huge number of priorities we have in this. And we'd be very happy, that today is not the day, but as we go along, if any of you want to seriously pursue these aspects, we'd be very happy to provide you with material or with briefings. This is going to be a major focus for us during this. And hopefully, as the months of next year go on, and we will actually move through an intergovernmental process, things will begin to come together. That is one of the things which I wanted to explain at length. I will touch upon some of the other aspects which will continue to be our focus, whether in our statements, in our bilateral meetings, in our support of resolutions, UN Security Council reform. That's going to be really on the table again. We are going to work with the next president of the GA, Ambassador John Ash, who I've already mentioned, who we expect would have a more constructive role than the previous president. And we hope that the intergovernmental process, which has already done 9 rounds, will now actually make that quality jump. He has got a sort of text in which he's put various people's positions, but what he does not have is an actual text which can be negotiated. What is called in the UN lingo, it's called CWD, a concise working document. So what we need is a concise working document on the table. We will continue to lobby with the African group because, without the 53-member African group coming on board, you're never going to get those votes in the General Assembly for reform. And we really need to take the message of the C10 and L69 common text to the African group back into the capitals so that they get the political support of moving towards reform. We're going to work with CARICOM, which is the Caribbean countries. They have come up with a very encouraging move a few months ago in which they have said, yes, we must have reform. They're willing to work with the African group, they're willing to work with L69, and they're willing to move this to negotiations. We're going to continue to work with G4. And here I think there's a lesson to be learned from what happened in Brazil, and which we would like to take forward in India, frankly. Because Brazil said that, look, this is not something which should be left to New York or should be left to the negotiating rooms. This needs outreach. This needs something, people to need writing about it, people to need talking about it. So after the G4 meeting, they had a seminar of about 100 people, largely media, academics, and so on. And I was amazed that, it resulted in about 60, 70 articles coming out. And I was also amazed at how little the public out there knew about what was going on. So we would like to take a lesson of that. We're going to be working with one of our think tanks, and we're going to be probably set up something on a smaller scale, but I think that is something on which we'd like all of you to be involved and to be part of. The other issues which are going to be pushed besides UN Security Council reform are issues of concern to us. Peacekeeping, for instance, which India continues to be a major player, as you all know. The nature of peacekeeping is changing. The nature of decision-making regarding peacekeeping is causing us concern in many ways. More in the nature of conflicts are changing. The classical role of peacekeeping is being eroded. And the peacekeepers are being asked to do more and more under difficult conditions. We have a concern as a major troop contributing country. We have been pushing these concerns. We will continue to highlight these in various fora. Terrorism is going to be an ongoing subject which we'll be following up. And of course, there's going to be focus on the disarmament aspects, where we have our traditional resolutions to offer. There's going to be focus, although the main focus is in Geneva, but when it comes back to New York, on human rights aspects. And we are going to also, well, you already know that we have an election coming up, which is going to be the Comptroller and Auditor General of India for the UN Board of Auditors in November this year. Now, I'm just going to stop there because I can see that I put you to sleep, some of you. So I'm going to stop there, and maybe the questions will help revive the audience.
Thank you, Navtej, and all of you arise, awake, and stop not. Now the floor is yours. One question, you finish yours. Yes, sir.
सर यूएन असेंबली के इजलास में नवाज शरीफ भी जाएंगे और प्राइम मिनिस्टर भी जाएंगे, क्या इनकी मुलाकात संभव है?
इसके बारे में हमने आपको बिगनिंग में कहा था कि 20 तारीख को विदेश सचिव खुद बात करेंगी और इसके बाकी के जितने प्राइम मिनिस्टर के एंगेजमेंट्स में उस ब्रीफिंग में हम बताएंगे।
भारत पाकिस्तान
आज प्लीज लेट मी आंसर, यू आस्क योर क्वेश्चन, प्लीज गिव द माइक, आई विल आंसर। My point is very clear. We will answer about Prime Minister's engagement on the 20th. So please be patient and give us the space and time to respond to this, and we will respond to this.
Ranjit.
Yes, Ranjit.
What will be the thrust of Prime Minister's address to UNGA?
This is going to be a difficult one to answer at this stage because once we have to work, constantly the work is going on the Prime Minister's address.
Yes, Manish.
Talking of the UN Security Council reforms, when you say we're going to continue lobbying with the African group, would there be some outreach or bilateral meetings in New York itself, since so many African ministers and others are going to be there? That's number one. Also, I wanted you to
One question.
Just a related.
That's enough.
Okay.
One question, please.
No, I think the way it works is that we have had a special delegation go down to the African Union Summit earlier this year, where this was a major piece of conversation and major lobbying with each of the African heads of delegations. That is the right place to lobby. What happens in New York is a almost a very technical level negotiation, which constantly goes on between the missions and between the negotiating groups, say the L69, this is at ambassador level. But I get your point. It's something which we will utilize every possible opportunity, even in New York, when our people are there. Because what is being seen in New York in General Assembly statements at the head of state, head of government, foreign minister level, is that virtually, the large majority of speakers who is in favor of UN reforms. And then we have to note those, we have to take those, then we have to get down to the technical level and say, look, this is what you are pushing, your president, your prime minister, and this is where we need to now get our heads together. So it's a constant process, Manish. Yeah.
Gautam.
Well, sir, on the counter-terrorism issues, there are many organizations or the persons being directly named from the Union Security Councils, and the member states are not taking appropriate action as they are supposed to take. Whether it's a matter of concern, how would you focus in the United Nations General Assembly, or which forum you would raise this concern?
Well, we have been raising this when we were in the UN Security Council as chairman of the Counter-Terrorism Committee, and this is something which we talk about every time we talk about terrorism, that there are red lines, there are UN sanctions, and these must be respected, and these should not be allowed to be watered down from what have been accepted at an international level. And because we don't believe in minor distinctions on this, in which people can be allowed to cross these lines depending upon political exigencies. I think this is something that we are constantly talking about, and you're right, we will be talking about in the committees when it comes to discussing terrorism, and we will be talking about in our general statements and our bilateral dialogues.
Dr. Awad.
It is regarding the same point you raised about the global financing of terrorism. I think my country, Syria, has been inflicted with the terrorists at the moment, and there are more than $2,000 being paid for each al-Nusra recruit. So there is a good amount of money spent. How really it's relevant in these talks in the UN when they interpret the law according to their own?
Well, you know, the way, in the context I mentioned it, it is more in a thematic context, not pertaining to one particular, one particular arena of activity. It's very important thematically to accept these concepts and to decide to work together, because it's not an on-off thing, that today one part of the world is in a trouble, so we get activated, next we keep quiet for the next 5 years, and then we have to have an international comprehensive effort, which is why India has been proposing for several years a convention on counterterrorism at the UN. And we are trying to push it, get it off the ground and get it negotiated, and we are faced with all sorts of technicalities which are slowing it down. So certainly we're going to be discussing the financing aspects, the cooperation aspects in all the terrorism bodies. We are no longer on the Security Council at the moment, but there will be several occasions where we can. And as far as Syria is concerned, I think that's a subject of another debate. And when and how the UN comes into it is going to be something which we are going to have to see.
Anchal?
Sir, you're saying that we want to eradicate poverty without any qualifiers. How are you going to be able to, how would you sell this at UNGA? No qualifiers, no sustainability, no environment concerns. Mind if you could elaborate? And our development record so far on MDGs is very, very poor, even if you compare it to South Asia. So what's going to be our explanation there?
I don't think our MDG record is that poor in 2 or 3 of those very critical MDGs. Some, yes, we need much more to do. What I meant when I said we want to eradicate poverty without qualifications doesn't mean that we want to do it like that on our own. But certainly we do not want the goal of poverty eradication in international dialogue to be dimmed by putting on qualifiers, right? That, the people say that, people are poor here because you don't take care of environment. No. I think it was said by one of our former prime ministers that poverty is the biggest polluter. So, it is actually the other way around. That is what I meant. Certainly, we are committed to Rio, we are committed to sustainable development, but we are committed to a balanced approach. The economic, the social, and the environmental pillars of sustainable development should move together. You can't leave out one at the cost of the other. That's what I meant.
Naz?
Yeah, this question is also becomes related to the previous one. You said a high-level panel is preparing a report, and you have to see that India's major concerns are not missed out. So what are these concerns which you see missing out?
Well, the high-level panel has already given its report to the UN Secretary General. Based on that, the UN Secretary General has now given his report. So our purpose in our conversations has been, and this is our position also, that the high-level panel report is a report which should be a good input. It should not be the end result, because we haven't had a chance to negotiate it. It is an input which will go into the negotiations. Concerns there were, we don't want the development simple, and I'll give it to you in a simple one-sentence form. We don't want the development agenda to be converted into a governance agenda. The development agenda must remain a development agenda. It must retain its focus on poverty eradication and economic growth. And it should be for everybody, and it should have in itself its means of sustaining the implementation. Which is what basically, like in Rio, you had the 2 things of you need technology assistance and you need financing. How are you going to save the environment? So you need technology sharing, you need financing, you need means of implementation. So you cannot have governance which is global and financing which is domestic. So you have to, so we have to balance these. And I must say that our conversations with the various interlocutors helped to introduce a certain sense of balance. A little more balance in the recent report that we have seen from the UN Secretary General, but now we would like to get it to the negotiating table and then make sure that not only India, the large majority of countries are developing countries, and they have their concerns also.
Dr. Akhilesh Suman.
Sir,
I got it correct?
yeah.
Thank you.
His Highness...
You don't add London returned.
Sir, His Highness Aga Khan is here in Delhi and he is meeting many dignitaries. So can you just throw some light on the purpose and outcome of the visit?
Dr. Suman, first outcome, the visit is ongoing. So you would appreciate that I can't indicate. But the Aga Khan Foundation has a lot of activities which are, and the Aga Khan Foundation has been actively supporting a lot of activities in Delhi and outside Delhi related to restoration, for example, related to poverty alleviation. So the Aga Khan Foundation is an important partner with whom we do interact on a regular basis to promote socio-economic development. And in that context, he is visiting India, and we will, of course, let you know the outcome once all his meetings are over. I hope that clarifies the situation, because right now, even as we speak, he is inaugurating part of the restoration work of the Humayun's tomb. And yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is related to the ongoing war crime trial in Bangladesh.
Just a minute.
Okay.
Have we finished all issues related to Mr. No.
Just now you answered Aga Khan question. That's
Yes,
okay, no problem.
Just hold on. Are there anyone else who would like to seek any questions related to UN? Yes. Now you can proceed.
Thank you. My question is related to the ongoing war crime trial in Bangladesh, in which several Jamaat Islami leaders have been convicted. Some got life terms, some death sentences. However, several countries and international human rights organizations have criticized the process, citing its various shortcomings and drawbacks. Now, I just wanted to know what's India's take on the issue. Do you think it's Bangladesh's internal matter, or you have certain opinion on that?
I think we've, even that statement is an opinion that you said. But that said, let me try, I think we have said it previously, that while this is an internal matter for Bangladesh and for the Bangladeshi people to decide on, we do understand that given the horrific crimes that were committed by those who are now being tried, we do understand and take into account the aspirations of the Bangladeshi people to try and bring a closure to this by ensuring justice is provided. Now, as regards what the procedural issues are, this is for the Bangladeshi people to decide and come to a decision on. No? No. Over. UN time is over now. Yes. Unless anyone wants to ask. UN. All right.
So you spoke about lack of implementation. Any bright ideas from our side, whether it's CBDR or, it's generally been...
You took the words out of my mouth. The CBDR is a very important Rio Plus 20, or in fact a Rio principle. And this is the common but differentiated responsibilities. This in itself builds in the two aspects that I mentioned about technology, cooperation and sharing, as well as financing. So it's very important to keep the debate on sustainable development goals, as well as on the broader post-2015 development agenda, on the Rio Plus 20 principles, which means essentially CBDR, but not only.
Yes, Rajiv.
Akbar, this is on Bangladesh. A question which was just asked. This relates to a more specific event. As you know, that one of the convicts who was convicted in the 71 war crimes case, he was given a lifer. And he appealed to the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, and the Supreme Court enhanced the punishment to capital punishment. Now, as you know, that these are the kind of cases which triggered Shahbag Square demonstrations and the unrest there in the civil society. The question is, on this particular specific case, do you have a reaction, and does India have a take on this particular specific thing, and how does it impinge on the forthcoming elections there?
Good try. I think I've already responded to our generic view on the issue and on how we see it. On the specifics, I responded to him by saying that we will not get into the process of this, nor will we get into each and every specific case, but we have confidence in the justice system in Bangladesh, and that it will deliver justice to the people of Bangladesh.
Al-Qaeda has given direction to its cadres not to attack on Hindu and Muslims in Muslim-dominated countries. How do you see this development?
I mean, you know our view on Al-Qaeda, that it is a terrorist organization, that we are against terrorism, that we would like to see it extinguished. What it says is not a matter for us to respond to, because as far as we are concerned, it is evil personified.
On the sidelines of UN, will India raise this issue with Italy of non-cooperation in this Italian Marines case, or will you raise this matter in any forum there?
I don't think why we should raise it separately. We are in contact with the Italian government. In fact, just today, for your information, Mr. Stefano de Mistura, who is the special envoy of the Italian government, met with the External Affairs Minister. And we have explained to him that this is a case which relates to legal process. We as diplomats can try and facilitate an interaction between a legal viewpoint which the Italian government has and another legal viewpoint which our government has. But this is ultimately at base a legal issue, and we've suggested that we will facilitate interactions on this matter, and Mr. de Mistura, my understanding is, has agreed to stay back, and the process is on. So why do we need to interact somewhere else on this? We are interacting with them on a regular basis. Yes.
The matter is sub judice. Then how do you consider it as an interactive process, and how do you further engage with Italians on this when the matter is considered by our courts?
That's right, the matter is sub judice, but I don't think anybody is questioning that the judiciary has to decide on this. Ultimately, what they are discussing is what process to adopt, and in that there can be different opinions between different viewpoints of this. And and I started by saying that this is a legal process. All we as diplomats can do is to try and facilitate direct interaction or understanding of each other's legal views, so that if things are required, it will go to a legal process and clarified. But if things can be worked out between the two parties who are lawyers on both the sides, perhaps we can take it forward. So the issue is not that anybody is intervening in the legal process. The issue is only to perhaps translate what is in the legal view of a group of lawyers to another group of lawyers. That's all we are in this. Yes, Geeta?
On the 4 Marines who are in Italy, India has been insisting that they be sent back for the investigations, to further the investigations. Stefano de Mistura today very clearly said that Italy is not going to send them back. Anything on that front, because the Indian administration and the government has been insisting that they be sent back, but the Italian government is only talking about the 3 options that they have given to India and are really not moving on, at least looking at sending the 4 Marines back.
Geeta, as they say, half knowledge is always dangerous. You are talking of 3 options. There are other options also that are being considered, and you will understand that this is an iterative process. I can't get into outlining what options are there on the table, but there are several options, including the 3 you said and others too. Yes, sir.
Recently, the Foreign Secretary visited Nepal, and if there is an election in Nepal in November, will India give actual support to the election?
Our support to the election process in Nepal is largely logistical in nature, and we have already begun that process, and that process entails provision of, for example, for the Election Commission vehicles. We've provided vehicles for the Election Commission. We also are committed to a larger number of vehicles also for the security services, because an essential ingredient of an election process is to ensure a safe and peaceful environment for the voters, and in that context the Nepalese government had requested us to provide vehicles, which we are in the process of providing additional vehicles. We've provided 1 set of vehicles and the rest are in the process, and we hope to provide them by October. Yes, Ranjana.
On Sushmita Banerjee, anything on the probe that is going on, and the Deputy Foreign Minister was here yesterday, spoke to the Foreign Secretary.
Yes, on the sad case of Dr. Sushmita Banerjee, things have evolved in the probe since we last met. While it was initially for us very distressing that an Indian woman was killed brutally, we now find that it's taking a disturbing turn. And that is that the governor of Paktia province has indicated to our ambassador that those who are involved in this, based on arrests made since we last met here, seem to be what he described as Pakistani Taliban, and the indication was that they were based from areas beyond Afghanistan borders. Now this is extremely disturbing for us, but we have left the investigating part in the hands of the investigating authorities in whom we have full confidence, and this is what they have shared with us so far. We understand that 6 to 7 people have been arrested, and what is evolving and coming out from them is what has been shared with others too, and they have shared it with us. We will follow this case with laser-like precision, because this is something extremely disturbing. Yes, sir.
So can you clarify India's position in participation in Commonwealth Head of Governments meeting slated sometime at Colombo?
Our view has been that we will take a call on this in due course, and this has also been reflected elsewhere, including by the organizers, that we will take a call well in time, and we will also inform you on this. Pardon? I can't.
Any readout on Ashton Carter's?
This is a Ministry of Defense issue, and this is your second question. Yes, the first question. Just a minute.
Your reaction on firing in Punch, by Pakistani side?
I've always said that what happens on the border is for the sentinels of the border to respond to, and they will respond. You've heard me say this several times. Nice try again. Yes, sir. This is your take on it, I understand. This is your take on it, because yes, I mean, my point is that I don't know whether the Iranian government ever told this, that they were willing to take 100%. My understanding is that there is a percentage agreed to between Iran and India in terms of how we will pay for crude, and that is 45% and 55%. The rest is your take on it.